You know, like many of these kinds of films, there's an audience surrogate, and I am the audience surrogate in this film. I am the person that is very normal. Everybody else has some extraordinary powers and whatnot, and mine is being pretty logical and rational. So yeah, the best way to describe it is an audience surrogate.
Well, I did have some role models, but I don't want to tell you who they are. I mean, people in my life, even the way he dresses and the way he does his hair is very like a frenemy of mine. Well, it's not just the role, it's the whole project made me laugh, and that's very rare. I think that comedy writing is 10 out of 10, and I did with this, and I thought it was touching, and the characters, I'm drawn to losers. It was all about losers. Chris is so well cast in it. And as a part, I thought, yeah, I can have some fun with that. I saw him as an unhappy man who knows he's an arsehole, but would like not to be.
Yeah, I think that's really a great moment in the film, because I think if there's an emotional arc for my character, it's that he learns how to truly be selfless. You know, he's been selfish before in his life, and it's destroyed his family, and now he has an opportunity to redeem himself by making a choice that is the best for his family, and the best for his family is to take care of Holga. It was for this, we all played as a cast to get to know one another.
Well, I don't know if it counts, but I sometimes go to screenings of The Sound of Music where people dress up as the characters, and I went as the Baroness.
That's actually true, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm mad about the Baroness.
God, you love Sound of Music.
I really do, yeah. She's a tragic character.
For sure, yeah. I mean, Dungeons & Dragons is such a sprawling world that to try and encompass the whole thing in one movie would be nearly
just be
impossible.
Alienating to the audience. You know, I think first and foremost it was just focusing on the characters and building them out in a way that people would really appreciate and feel like they can relate to them. And then you thrust them in this world and introduce all of these interesting and unique atmospheres and creatures and locations, but never actually bogging people down with all of the minutiae of it.
Yeah, we wanted to suggest that they're part of a much bigger world in the way Star Wars focused on these ragtag heroes, but you never spent too much time outside of their journey.
We're a bit superstitious, so we don't love to talk about sequels, but I think there's so much to the setting and the atmosphere and the cities and everything involved in D&D that you could tell a million stories and not ever tell the same one.
There's also, the fun thing about D&D is that they have worlds that don't look like your standard medieval fantasy world. That we chose this area because it is an easy, understandable way in for an audience that doesn't know the game. But if there is a next movie, it would be fun to take it to places that you haven't seen in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings.
Well, I wouldn't want to play any of those games with them if they take it that seriously, because I think the thing that's so unique about Dungeons & Dragons is that it's always got one foot in the contemporary, because they're stories that are being told now, you know, they're constantly evolving. So while it may exist in this pseudo-medieval landscape, there's also something very modern about it. And so it didn't feel like we were really betraying the source material by doing that.
I would even say that's the most D&D thing about this movie, is that it captures the spirit of play. It captures the spontaneity, the unpredictability, and that the characters are always faced with things they have to solve, problem solve. And that's really what happens when you play.
We like to take a tactile approach to how we portray magic. You know, in D&D, it requires certain components to be able to pull it off, whether they be material or somatic or verbal. And we were very true to the rules when we were doing that, because I think it definitely sets us apart from the way that magic is visually portrayed in other films, where people are generally just doing that and energy comes out of their hands, which feels kind of lazy.
Dozens of them, yeah. Some are hard, some are, I mean, for example, somebody already online went through the language that is written there is called Thoras, and it's actually a language that you can find online, you can translate, and so they've translated, for example, the inscription on Zank's sword, or in other places, the wanted poster that Forge holds up, those are all actually, they say something in that language.
Well, we're pretty ambitious, and we knew we wanted to kind of level up in a way from game night and the sheer size of that film. And we also love to be able to put our voice and sensibility into something that could be for all audiences, that serves as a sort of tentpole film. But no, it was just a really exciting opportunity to be able to inject that unique tone without ever actually betraying what D&D represents to people.
It's a good question though. Why is fantasy seeing this resurgence now? I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's because the harder life gets for people in the real world, the more they find escape in a world of fantasy.
Yeah. I think also as technology progresses and the way that we've sort of become removed from one another, D&D is the perfect outlet to be able to communicate with one another in a kind of analog setting.
Yeah. Also COVID, I think, contributed because it was a game you could play via Zoom with one another. Well, yes. I mean, without naming any specific political figures, yeah, Forge was definitely inspired by certain sorts of people that come to mind. But yeah, I think it's all about the misuse of authority and putting the selfish above.
Under the guise of giving people what they want, which I think is a sort of multi-layered and tricky approach. But also, we just love the fact that Forge is this really charming, likable guy that you can't help but love and hate. And I think that's also very much representative of a lot of politicians, you know?
Well, he's a character. There's a dragon called Thembershot, who's a red dragon, who's known to be very gluttonous. He's not necessarily portrayed the way we have. We thought it would be fun to do a dragon in a way you've never seen before, so we took certain liberties.
We tried to avoid the generic when it came to all of the dragons that we were portraying, including the black dragon, which spews acid, which is ripped directly from the lore, but you haven't really seen before on film, and then our stone dragon at the end, which was kind of a nod to Harryhausen.
And so it developed quite naturally because we all played a big game of Dungeons & Dragons before we started filming. We all got to play as our characters and kind of play around with how imaginative it could be, and discovered precisely how weird everyone else in the cast was through that process. And then we kind of filmed and played around in a very similar manner. It's how I'd imagine I experienced it. I don't know what you got.
No, that's very similar to what I got. That playthrough was integral to the performances in the film, I feel, because you don't normally get that when you are acting in a film. You don't normally get an opportunity to kind of like improvise outside the circumstances of the script. Acting is like a glorified version of playing D&D because it's essentially the same thing. You research your character, you imagine them in a circumstance, and you all collectively agree to tell a story together. And it was, yeah, I might like play a D&D campaign for every role I do now,
right?
To like flesh out my character.
Just do like a themed D&D.
It is.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a bit way of like how to approach acting, just generally to have done the research. And what if you make like a character sheet, but for every character that you play moving forward, it's basically just research and setting up a background for yourself. It's basically what you do, just on one piece of paper, so it's
with more numbers. Like I do a character sheet for every character. Just like I don't do stat blocks.
Yeah,
that'd be weird.
a little strange.
I don't prepare every. You know what? Fantasy films are exactly the same as other films, except you prepare the characters for combat a little bit more. That's the only difference.
Basically, yeah. You don't prepare for combat for any other role that you
Not so much.
Oh.
Occasionally intellectual combat. Or emotional combat. But not so much the physical combat.
Poetic.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was it like?
It was incredibly important for me. No, but also like not being facetious, I think it's incredibly important for everyone in the cast. that every one of these characters is fully fleshed out, that we're not playing into outdated tropes, and that all of these characters have the kind of agency that we expect to see in the world around us.
I like how I made you answer that question.
No, you know what? I was going to jump in, and I didn't want to kind of seem ungracious, because it's like, that should be important to us, and it is.
It 100% is important to me, too, and I've said this, we've talked about this before, how the movie, I feel like, reflects life. Like, I think people are like, wow, the women are finally strong. I'm like, women are strong in real life. That's not, like, we're just representing what already exists. Sure, it's fantasy, but I know that I have a lot of women in my life that could kick my ass. Like, like not just, like, strong emotionally or, like, strong intellectually, but, like, physically strong. So I'm happy we get to represent what actually exists.
I think this is a good, forward step in cinema, where I feel like we shouldn't focus so much on strength as something that, it has to, I think it's good to show women, like, the strength and what am I trying to say?
I'm right there with you.
But it's like, have women be strong in cinema, but have it not be like a thing where it's like, I think they have full-fledged characters, each character in this group, and have it not be like, women have to be strong in order for it to be like a good representation of women. People can be strong, people can be weak, and that's fine. It shouldn't be like a thing that has to be shown. But I think these women, at least my character and Michelle's character, we're both strong in our own ways, we're weak in our own ways. But that, I think our characters are so fleshed out that it's not just like, oh, these women are strong and have this be a prominent thing. It's these characters are just these characters, whether women or men, Anyways,
pretty much.
It was a weird way of describing
No, that's
it.
really well said.
Yeah.